Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Alex Geller is joining us today to lead this webinar on discovering Excel and business intelligence for BI360. I'm Holly Muller-Jones, the Customer Account Manager here at the Resource Group, and I'd like to warmly welcome you and thank you for taking the time this afternoon to review the Business Intelligence Suite from Solver BI360. We're actually very excited to hold the webinar session today, as there's been a lot of interest from customers about a strategic roadmap for both Forecaster and FRX and Management Reporter, as well as customers are having an increased need for business analytics and having the ability to look at department and business performances and trends. BI360 is a corporate performance management suite with a direct connection to the Microsoft Dynamics GP tables for live financial reporting on all modules, as well as has a strong budgeting and forecasting and analytical tool. So TRG is actually not only a proponent of BI360, but we're also a certified BI360 practice. Today, again, we have Alex Geller, who's a Senior Solution Architect from Solver, who'll be leading the presentation. Alex has been not only in the field as a consultant, but on the sales team and leading the BI360 practice over at Solver for a number of years. So as we get started, Alex, I believe you have the reins to the presenter, so I'm going to pass it over to you.
I do. Thank you, Holly, and thanks everyone for joining today. Just quick housekeeping. Does everyone hear me okay? And does everyone see the screen? And you know, Holly, if you can kind of just let me know if you see it.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. And you know, the point here is I'm going to go through a quick PowerPoint. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm going to spend a lot more time in the product itself for the next hour. Just giving you a look and feel of what you can do with our budgeting and planning tool. Now, towards the end, we'll have time for a Q&A. So if you can type in your questions in the chat window, Holly will compile them and then read them off, and we can address them individually during the end of the session. So without further ado, you know, what Solver BI360 does is we're really in the core performance management space. And if you look at us as a company, a little over 1,700 customers. We're growing. In last year, we grew a bit over 45% in terms of revenue. And you know, this is our third year on the Gartner Magic Quadrant, and we're really the only company in that quadrant that has that live integration to Great Plains, and that's also Excel-based. Now, the various modules within this suite itself are the following. So there's reporting, there's planning, there's dashboarding, and this, for those folks in the room that have a data warehouse, you can think of this as a data mart. For the folks that don't, you can think of it more as one place for all your data sources. On the reporting side, you'll see that the report design happens in Excel, but it's Excel with drag and drop capabilities. We also have an ad hoc reporting tool, and you can execute in Excel, on the web, and we have mobile apps, both in Google Play and in the Apple Store. And from a distribution standpoint, you know, you could distribute them by saying users are going to receive these reports, here's when they're going to receive them, and our automated system goes in and sends those out. And you can even convert it to a PDF, Word, and other formats. Now, today's focus is not going to be around this component. But just note that, you know, if as you're going through planning, you're saying this is fantastic, but we also want to replace that MR component and something that can do sub-ledger reporting as well, you know, you can add that on as a phase 2 or 3. And then dashboarding, maybe I'll show you just a quick 1 or 2 examples, but again, not going to be the primary focus for today. And then the data mart, which is very important for budgeting and forecasting because of the following. And this is really the last slide that I'll illustrate, before jumping straight into the product itself. Now, like I said, on the reporting aspect of it, we have that live reporting from Great Plains component. And this is, by the way, truly live, so when you post a journal entry, you'll immediately see that in the reporting tool. Also, this has Subledger and all the modules from Great Plains. Now, the next thing we typically go through after we replace MR, let's say, and maybe do a forecasting tool, companies will come back and say, hey, your tool works phenomenal. We have all these other data sources. And what you can do is actually load other data sources into our data warehouse. And this can be used for reporting and for planning. Now, this is really important. What you'll see is, hey, I loaded in my payroll system along with Great Plains for one of the templates. For you, it can be anything, any data sources that you currently use or you'd like information for when you budget. You load them all into one place, and then in Excel, you create your input forms. And then you can deploy it both in Excel and on the web. And as I'm going through this, I'll show you both options, and we can consult on a basis, and we'll work together with the resource group implementation team to recommend best practices. For companies of larger sizes with multiple locations, they may want to do the web-based input, whereas if you're centrally Office of Finance, the Excel-based might suffice. But I'll go ahead and show you both. So without further ado, what I'll do, I'll start off with our web portal, which is, how is an end user going to go through forecast and budget. Then I'll transition and show you a few Excel-based templates. So, what I'll do, I'll open Internet Explorer, but you can access it through any browser. We also have apps available, both in Google Play and in the Apple Store. And I'll log in here with my credentials. Now, this is extremely important because the security that you set up in one place in BI360 is carried across all of the applications. So if I'm logging in here, I'm in charge of sales and marketing, and I log in with my credentials, that's going to be the only department I'll be able to see. Furthermore, you can actually limit security to be as granular as you need it to be. So it could be on the account level or anything else. And the way this works, this has all the templates, for your dashboards, reports, as well as input forms. You can go toggle certain things as favorites so that you can reference it here and see the ones that are most relevant to you. Now, over on the left-hand side, what we've created is an organization structure. So maybe you have your employees go in, they can look at the strategy and input goals from a high-level perspective, and then from those goals, they can input tasks. And really what this is, we're not a task management software, but we said, hey, all these companies have these high-level goals, and then they assign tasks. We have a way you can actually input that data. So instead of writing it on a board somewhere or keeping it in a PowerPoint, why not go in and just easily, type in your task, and I'll just be, 1, and then select the strategic initiative that you indicated earlier. You can put a status, completion date, and percentage, and then store that data back into the database. And the easiest way to think about just a notebook that you actually push into a database, but it's advantageous because if you actually really wanted to quickly do an actual to budget comparison and see how your expenses are doing, or pull in any other information to quickly generate a report and say, Alex here, who's in charge of this strategic initiative, is not hitting it, and because of that, here are the effects on the GL. That's all a report that you can design just by having a simple input button here. But the majority of the focus today, is something new that we implemented, is going to be on the forecasting and budgeting piece. So I'll scroll down, and you can see that everything's organized in hierarchy. So after I'm done looking at my strategy, I can forecast, and then I can create my budget, then I can view my actual to budget reports, and then maybe here, some of the more analytical dashboards. From a forecasting perspective, we'll start very simply. What's the benefit of having a tool such as BI360? And for those of you that are coming off of Excel, if I expand this out, really simply, this ran for corporate US for sales and marketing. We get 9 months of actual, it's coming from Great Plains, and 3 months of forecast. Now, as a user, I can go in and forecast the rest of the year. And by the way, for you, this will be blank. I'm a solution architect, so we have some numbers here in the database. And after I'm done, I'm going to click this Store Data button. And I'm not going to click it here because it's a demo model, but once you're finished, you store data, and once the template is finalized, there will be this check mark, which I'll explain a little later. Let's pause and say, okay, pretend I'm doing this in Excel right now, and it's now October, and I want to forecast for the rest of the year. What I'd have to do is copy the actual data from October from MR, paste it, save as, change the version, and fill this out. Whereas with our tool, you go in, you pick up the new months, click a button, and we're not going to save this here. And if I expand this out, it clearly gave me data now. Clearly gave me actual data for October. That's coming from our Great Plains system. And what does that do? What's the advantage really? Well, one is you're not using links in Excel, so it doesn't have the tendency of breaking. Two is you're eliminating any manual errors again from copy and pasting. And then three, it'll save you time, right? I mean, you don't have to save as and look for that template. You don't have to copy and paste it for all the months. And now multiply that for every single department, division, and so on. Here, if I now want to go in and do that same thing, except for finance and accounting, I go in and now get a brand new template for finance and accounting where I can forecast the rest of the data. And by the way, this is where, if you have department heads, they'll just have access to their own department. This is where security kicks in. So, if I'm in charge of, say, 2 or 3 departments, those are the only ones I'll be able to select from or see. And if you just want to push it out so each department head gets to see his or her own information, you can set it up that way. And over on the left-hand side, if you want to compare finance and accounting, sales and marketing, copy and paste the data and put it in here, you can easily do so. Also, what you can do, you can actually go in and export this back into Excel or share it. And here's a button. You can scan this with your QR reader if you have it on your phone, or you can go in, download this back into Excel. And maybe this is, forecasting template. Click Save. You can see that the download was completed. And now I can go back to my desktop. I have this forecasting template, and if I wanted to do, some sort of manipulation here, maybe I want to do an average formula, recreate the forecast, and multiply that maybe by, say 20%, I could do that. And by the way, if you have the Excel plugin, you can actually store it back to the database directly from within here. So now, great, let's say we're done forecasting. I understand how it works. Let's go in and let's take a look at a few budgeting examples. And by the way, these are all just standard templates. We have about 14 various vertical models. So if this is not exactly fit for you, you can leverage some of our other demo models. And furthermore, as I'm showing this, all of this is going to be customizable. And our advantage is you're grading this stuff in Excel, so you're going to be able to use all the formulas and formatting. So let's take a look. Pretend, I'm a budget manager now, so I'm going to store assumptions for everyone. And I'm using these as assumptions, taxes, and benefits that are going to flow into my payroll. But for you, this could be any driver you want. This can be, say, your economic conditions. You have low, mid, high. You input those, and then you see how it affects the rest of your P&L, your balance sheet, and stuff like that. And then this can be customized to your business too. As a consultant, I actually did one for a mega yacht company that said, hey, based on the square feet of that yacht, we have to put it in different places. There's different expense associated with it. And what we do is actually budget by square feet by yacht. So that was their input form. And that fed into their P&L and a few what-if analysis. Okay? And the way it works, I'll expand this out. And what I'll do is I actually will go in and just change this to, say, 7.21, change my capital life if I want to, my travel expenses. And in our example, change this 7.21 and store that data back into the database. Now, this is great if you're a budget manager, but your department heads that are just inputting their personnel, they don't really care that the FICA rate changed. But what they are going to be able to do is go in, they're picking their company, and I'll say this is the department that I'm in charge of. Click this button here. And by the way, this can auto be set to auto refresh for the year and month, so it automatically gives them updated data without them needing to select these guys. I'll expand this out a bit. And here for finance and accounting, because that's the department we picked, we see the full-time, part-time employees, and right beneath, it's going to store down to the general ledger. If I go and say, Travis here is going to get a promotion maybe to, senior VP of finance, and that's going to happen in, I can change the months here, in March of next year, and unfortunately in November, Travis is going to be going back to business school. I can input a salary here, and then I can say, great, if Travis does really well, we want to give him a little bit of a bump here, 10% to incentivize him to come back, right? We can also do a dollar increase. This is where you probably wouldn't have both, but I'm just showing you that it's flexible. And we'll say, yeah, it's eligible for benefits. Right below, by the way this works is you can also do that for your part-time employees. But if I want to say I want to hire a part-time senior accountant in the month of June, and this is what how many hours they're going to work, and here's the rate, what we're going to pay them, it actually says to be hired number 7. And when you hire someone, it's going to replace with his or her name. So looking at this, we see for Travis, if I scroll over here and look at the salary, it started in March, calculated, you see the little increase here because we gave him a bump, and it drops off in December, right? Continue scrolling through, you see the total comp, and now for the taxes and benefits, notice how it uses that 7.21 FICA rate. And the reason it uses that instead of the 8.55, which I showed you previously, is because the budget manager made that change here, right? And it goes in and calculates everyone's minimum, maximum for the FICA, FUTA, SUTA, workers' comp, and head count. Okay? But the huge point here is, for those of you that are coming off of Excel or Forecaster, you're not using links, and it's really flexible in terms of scenario control. And then, most importantly, in my opinion, is you have the full-time, part-time employees that are coming from your payroll system. Great, and you have this GL component. So you're combining, data source along with data from your general ledger. And by the way, for the companies that are saying this is great, but we do more of a top-down approach, this also shows you the flexibility of these templates. Here I'll do an example where I pick up finance and accounting, admin, and HR. Click OK, refresh this. I'm not going to store this back, just test database. And now, when I go in and expand this, I can clearly see admin, full-time, part-time employees, stores down to the general ledger. And by the way, here's the forecast, so I can quickly see the variance. If I continue scrolling down, finance and accounting, full-time, part-time employees. Scroll down a little bit, and you can see it sorts to the GL and HR, right? So pretty flexible the way it expanded down on the column level. Excuse me, on the row level. My apologies. Great. Kind of get it, both top-down and bottom-up approach, depend on your requirements. Now, the rule of thumb here is anything you currently do in Excel, you can replicate. So operational templates, absolutely. And here's an example of a CapEx, maybe, where we expand out. Great. We see that we can add the actual description of what we're going to buy, allocate it to a specific department, maybe add some descriptions to it. So supplies for new employees, and then we can say, great, we're going to purchase it in March. Here's the purchase price of it, and here's the quantity. And as I click enter, watch what happens. We get the capital expenditure in March, and then it uses that life that I projected in the previous assumptions template to depreciate the asset. Okay, and right below, it's going to go in and store to the general ledger again. Something more operational, and I'll show you a few more of these templates so you get a better feel for it. But here is an example where I'm going to store data based on my customers and my products. Expand this out. Great. I see within all of the sales reps, here's the products they sell, and I can go in and say for January, we're planning to sell 500 of consulting services, maybe 466 of other services, and we want our gross margin, to really stay at 15% here. And that goes through and adjusts the COGS. And you can do that by month here, January, February, and so on. And when you're done, store that data back. Okay? So again, if I don't want to see all these customers, I just want to see this one, this one, this one, this one. Click OK and refresh. And now the template goes through and just shows you those. Last template that I did want to illustrate is our operational expenses. And you're going to be able to leverage all these examples with really any template. I just happen to choose this one. And expand this out, choose my department. I can see that this enables me to store data for next year, okay? And over on the right-hand side gives me 9 months of actual because I picked up September and 3 months of forecast. And guess where that forecast is coming from? That forecast is coming from the very first template that I showed to you, right? So nothing's linked. And then right below, same concept here. If we actually push data back in, click stored for the sales and marketing full-time, part-time employees, that would store right here in the GL. So you can see once you input your operational expenses, your total budget and the budget last year along with the variance. I get it. I can input in every cell, but what if I don't want to? What if what I want to do for office supplies is I want my users to add some line item details? So hey, exactly what are we spending money on office supplies? Which ones? I can right-click, click this, and then right under office supplies, I can go in and say, I'm going to be spending this much on paper in January, maybe also in February. I can also say, great, in addition to that, here are pens, here's how much I'm going to spend, and you can keep going. So really valuable for creating a much more granular process that's now stored back into a database. Okay? And this one could be pencils. And by the way, also, if I did want to add comments, I can click this button and it'll actually pull in a window where I can type in, January, we purchased a lot of pencils for new employees. Okay, so You can add cell level comments. Also, if you say, hey, for legal, we really don't need line item details, but we know it's going to take on the form of seasonality like it did from previous years. You can go in, add seasonality. You can say, hey, create a history of that account, so it pulls it in by month. And I know we're growing as a company, so our legal expenses are also going to grow by 9%. Click the Supply button, and now, we can see here for legal, it automatically filled in all of the cells, as opposed to you going in there and having to manually do some sort of Excel in every cell. And save, store data, that saves it, good. And once you're finished with the template, you click this check mark. And I'll show you in a second how the workflow is created. But before I do, you kind of might have noticed some of the dashboards and reports. And the point is, I'm not going to turn this into a webinar about reports or dashboards, but it is important for you to know, those are going to be accessible for you. So if after you're done creating your budget, you want to do something like this and view a dashboard that shows your execs who's inputting what based on the different departments for expenses, and maybe you can create a little dashboard like this, where they can go in and say, well, for sales and marketing, here's the monthly expense budget, it's growing, and here's the actual to budget comparison, along with the line item details if those are stored back. Okay, so pretty powerful in that sense. Click purchasing, you can see all the data here change as well. Okay? And then the last piece here is that workflow that I was showing you. Again, the check mark not highlighted in our template, but if I look at this, once you click the check mark, like demo user 1 did for personnel, it goes for approval. And then you as administrator can say, great, this is approved. Once you approve them, it goes into closed. So you can see that demo user 6 is already done with all of them. And just to use a few more examples, demo user 2, you can see they're not even going to see assumptions or personnel. Those are hidden from them. They're just going to do this revenue and cost of sale. And demo user 4 is slacking. He hasn't really filled anything else out. You can also set start and end date, by the way, so end users cannot input data after a certain time. Okay, so full workflow, so you can see who input data and when they input it. Now, going back, if you wanted to do an actual to budget report or anything else, right beneath it, you can go and run that operational expense for all of the departments. And here's an example. Maybe we want to see that personnel now in a report. Here you can see all the employees, their salaries, and I can expand and see how I budgeted by the various months. Okay? And here, maybe I want to run it for a different department or something like that. All of those concepts are the exact same. And now here, I can compare corporate US, all the departments, right here, to sales and marketing. Okay, so pretty neat way to actually analyze the data after you're done. Now, what I want to do, I kind of understand that component, is transition it a bit and just show you that over here, you do have the ability to add the dashboarding and reports. And here's the benchmarking dashboard, executive, and then getting more granular in nature. And here are a few of the reports. Here are a few of the subledger reports. This is ones for Google Analytics and so on. And the point here is if I open up this HR and payroll report, I can expand it. I can see all the employees. I can go in, right-click, and drill down into the subledger as well, okay, for any of this. So what I want to do next is, we'll transition out a little bit. You're saying this is great, but where was this built and what's the other way of deploying it? And that's where I'll go into Excel and show you methodology number 2. So pretend, you didn't want to deploy it on the web. Here's the version in Excel. So same concept, as with the reporting aspect, where you open Excel, okay, and when you're creating the report, you actually turn it into an input form. So for those of you that aren't familiar with our reporting module, you can go in and add planning, add those some functionality to your reports, and then turn it into forms. In our example, I'll go in assignments, and by the way, this also has full workflow. So when your user goes into assignments, they're only going to see the templates that they have access to. They can also create categories here. Their budgeting templates, their forecasting templates, and so on. Just so we compare maybe apples to apples, I'll show you a forecasting template here. Maybe I'll do something like this, where I'm going to go in and open up a template where I forecast the rest of the year, click it, and by the way, as this is pulling up, all of this was created in Excel, right? And you can see that. So regardless of which methodology you use to deploy it, the actual creation of it happens in Excel. And after you're done, you decide and say, hey, my organization, because we have different department heads everywhere, many locations, I want to go in and click this upload report so they see it on the portal, or I just want my user to go in here into this tab in Excel and pick out their company, pick out their department, click this button, and get a template. And in this example, same thing as you saw on the web, 9 months of actual, 3 months of forecast. Here you get last year's data that you can pull in here, so you can use any sort of formula you want. If you want to do, say, average here, average formula of all last year, and you want to multiply that by 20%, boom, and it goes through and updates that. And then after you're done, you go and say save data, and then it goes through, pushes that back into the database. Okay. Maybe one more template that I demonstrated on the web is that operational expense. Okay. So again, go back into assignments where you can create hierarchy for people, and I'll open up this expenses with line item detail, and then don't worry, I'll show you a few more templates after that. So we'll open up, go to this Run tab, and pick my company, my department. I'll just stay with September here. By the way, version control, really easy. This is where we decide, do I want budget version 1, 2, 3. For those of you guys that are coming off of Forecaster, and you probably have some scars and you realize how hard it is, here it's really a 2-minute exercise to go back into that warehouse, make the change, and then see it here. So click Run, and based on this, goes in, and I can close out of here, by the way, if I'd like. Goes in, and here's 12 months of data. Over here on the right-hand side, again, 9 months of actual, 3 months of forecast. Same thing as you saw on the web. Account server, budget on other forms here. And maybe here, for office supplies, I also want those line item details. Go in, click this Enter Data button. It'll go in, fetch a window. That will actually show you a little charting component as well, which might be a nice add-on that we don't have in the web. And you can go in, just 1 second here, I can go in and say, hey, I want to add some line item details. So maybe for office supplies, what I want to do is say, hey, again, I want to go in and spend it on, paper, pens, and so on. Oh, here. Ooh. All right, 1 second. Sorry about that. 1 sec. I'm getting paused. Huh. All right. We are back. All right. Sorry about that. Lost control there for a second. All right. So you go in, input for office supplies. I want pens, paper. Here's when I want to see it. Here are the months. And then you could also add comments. And once I'm done with that, by the way, I can just go here, go on to my next row. Okay. And for other office supplies, I can use my spreading methodology. And by the way, just to analyze this a little more thoroughly, if I copy history, it goes in, here's current year date, 9 months plus forecast. It just copies it, and then I can go in and say I want to adjust this by a certain percentage points. I can also switch this and do like an even spread where I type in the numbers. So very flexible in terms of how you do this stuff. And then update Excel. Okay. And you can go through and do that for all of your accounts. And then at the end, done with this, go in and store that data back into that data warehouse. And by the way, in case you're wondering why some of them are green and others of them are yellow, it's because what it does, it shows you that there's actually line item detail in there. So if I go in, let me make this a little bigger there. There you go. If I now go in and rerun this, okay, it's now stored in the database, so the color is going to change naturally, right? You can see that, office supplies turn green, while other supplies is yellow because it doesn't have that line item detail. And then you can go in and drill in and actually see that Alex here decided to add paper and pens as office supplies as the line item detail. Okay. And by the way, you can also drill in, which is a really neat functionality over here into the actuals. So you can drill into both Subledger and GL. Click, and it goes in and pulls in the underlying information for your actuals. Okay. Few more templates to show, but before I do, really all you do is save as. Every department head would do that for his or her own department. If I'm HR, I do that. User administrator, take this template, save as, and what you can do is select all the departments and run it consolidated. And you can needless to say do that for the companies too to see a consolidated total. Okay. Few more templates that I think are really useful. Here are some modeling templates. So here's an example where what I want to do is use a baseline to change a different budget version. Okay, so click here. You can see nothing's hard-coded. So what you can do is say, I want to take current budget version, and I want to create a new budget version, which is budget version 2. Click this button. Okay, and then based on this, it gives you the budget here. And for budget version 2, what you can do is scroll down and say, all right, well, I see how each account's going to do in current budget version. I get it. Maybe I actually want to decrease travel a little bit here by 8%. Okay, and what it does for you, it goes down. You can see, great. The current budget is 3.2 mil. Well, next year's budget, what I want to do is actually, excuse me, I apologize for this. This year's budget for budget version 2. I actually want to see how every single account here is going to look if I'm going to be more at like 600,000 or something like that. So when I click enter, notice how all of the accounts change, right, based on their proportion in the P&L, in order for you to go down and see that 600,000 as the net income. Okay, and by the way, you can go store that data back, and now your department head that's in charge of sales and marketing, right? They can go in here and say, there's no way we're going to spend that much on rent, decrease it by 9%, you can see the what if change and every account adjusted accordingly to keep that 600,000 in its place. Okay. Maybe just a few more templates to show. One of my favorite modeling templates here is where you can reforecast the rest of the year. So you go back in and say, great, here's the P&L. Now here, what it's doing is going to account for seasonality. So click run. Go in, same thing. But just notice how really what this is meant to illustrate is two things. One, anything you do in Excel you can do here, including complex formulas. And two, we already have a lot of these pre-built templates for you. So here, pick up September, click this button, run, and in the year to date, it goes in and gives you 9 months of actual. Let's close out of here for a sec. It gives you 9 months of actual year to date, and in column I, it gives you the annualized actual, which is just an Excel formula, but ultimately what it's doing is saying, hey, if seasonality continued, last year for service revenue, 60% of the revenue actually came from the last 3 months. Okay, so it uses that to say, well, if seasonality continues the way you're currently doing, for service account, you're going to be at this $5,869,000, and it does that for every single account. That's not the impressive part. The impressive part becomes the following. You scroll down, you see it, and great, you have a net income here of $515,000. But I want to say, this is great. I want to forecast the rest of the year to be more like 800,000. Maybe I know I'm hiring someone as a top producer. Maybe I know that I'm acquiring a company. By the way, this is great for pro forma analysis. So I'll go in here and say 600,000, click the enter button, and as I do that, all of these numbers here get adjusted accordingly. So all the numbers get adjusted based on their proportion in the P&L. In order for me to scroll down and say, great, I'm at 600,000, and you can see it's just an Excel formula. Now, you could do is go and store that data back, and this is now your new forecast scenario. Or you could take it a step even further. And let's do that. So let's say specifically, to reach that 600,000, your revenue has to grow by 12%. So you click that, you scroll up, and you see that here's how it got adjusted. So revenue has to be at $20,489,000. You have experience. You're looking at this, and you're saying, yeah, no way. I mean, it really has to be over 21 million. So what if I go in here and say 19% instead? Click this enter button, and you can see that this adjusted to over 21 mil. Okay, and as the revenue adjusted, the COGS, the expenses, all adjust based on their proportion in the P&L in order to keep that $600,000 still in place. Let's take it up a step further and say, great. Specifically, I know my operational expenses are going to grow by 10%, and what I want to do is go in and say, hey, they're going to grow by 10%, but sales and marketing is really going to be the cost center because we're hiring a bunch of new sales guys. So let's also increase that by 9%. Click, and if I scroll down now, I can see total administration, 10%, okay? Scroll down, finance and accounting right here by 10%, and if I continue scrolling, sales and marketing now is 19.9%, right? So it took that adjustment. And I can keep going, scroll down, and I can see that, hey, that 600,000 is still in place. So we just used a bunch of Excel formulas to create this. But again, right, a bunch of Excel formulas combined with the fact that you go in here, store that data, And now your various department heads can say, oh, there's no way salary is going to grow up to $944,000. Let's decrease this by 12%. Okay? And what if changes? All the accounts change in order to keep that net income in place. Okay? And then, next month, let's say you do this monthly, really in particular, instead of recreating a template and recreating any of these complex formulas, literally all you do is go in and say, go back and say designer, it's now October, click OK, refresh, the entire template now adjusts, right? Obviously according to the fact that, hey, for October, this is how we actually did. So let's look at the seasonality for the rest of the 2 months now instead of 3. Okay? So hopefully what you're really starting to get is some of the functionality and kind of like what else you can do with our templates. And by the way, all of these guys that I'm showing you are all templates that you can use. I don't want to say it's as going in there, pressing a few buttons and they automatically appear with your data, but nonetheless, really good starting points here. Okay? And by the way, for those of you guys that do allocations or anything like that, also a really good system is to use this. Here you can again see nothing's hard coded. If I look at this, these are just, oh, let me go back and run it. Here you go. And you can see that all this stuff right here, okay, these salaries, all of that, it's going to get adjusted based on what you input. So you go in, you pick up your parameters, you run this, and what this template does, here are all the allocation. So here's the post-allocation P&L, which is the last tab. Here's the salary allocations. You see a headcount allocation. You can click it here. It'll take you back to this tab. So you can use these guys, and you can allocate the products and the employees. So make these changes, scroll down, and see all of the changes in the allocated salary. You can allocate headcount here. You can allocate by square feet. You can allocate direct expenses based on anything you need. And then finally, you can see a P&L here. Okay. If I look at this P&L and close out of here real quick, this is a pre-allocation and then post-allocation by product, which you can see, and have the ability to go in and drill into the data. Okay. And last thing, great, I'm done inputting my budget. I want to see a report, and maybe what I'll finish off is just this decision pack. Again, huge benefit of having that reporting piece here is the fact that you can do a quick actual to budget report. You can see nothing's hard-coded here, okay? And that's because as a power user, what I'm going to do here is go in and just say, I don't care about any of this stuff. I just want to see my news tab, right? I want to see it fill up with actual words and data. So I'll say, I want to see this specifically for corporate US. Okay. I want to see this actual compared to budget. And I want to see this for the month of September. Click the Run button. And now all of these tabs are going to generate with data. Okay. In order to roll into a news tab. And by the way, this is using if statements in Excel. So, as your actual numbers change, the words are also going to change. So it says, corporate US, because that's the company we picked, sees great improvement in the month of September. It shows you how profitable you were, shows you your revenues, your top line, some of your products, and by the way, I can close out of here. And now you can see, great, gives you a excuse me, summary of your data. Here you can see a dashboard, so just charts, trend, so 12-month rolling trend as of September, because that's the month we picked. P&L variance, We can do an actual to budget with traffic lights as of September. By the way, I can expand on the column, show you 9 months of data, and expand on the row as well. Cash flow statement, balance sheet, a few more charts, sales data, where you can see my top 15 sales transactions with the salespeople, date they sold it, quantity, unit price, top 10 vendor payments, and receivable. And as this changes next month, Castle Resort is no longer in the 10th place. Maybe there's another customer that supersedes this 70,053. You'll now see that new customer. Okay. So creating your budget, great. And then you go back and you want to see how your actual to budget is doing in the month of October. Okay. Instead of going through a bunch of various Excel files where links might have broken, finding spreadsheets, and having an analyst spend hours of time putting data together as opposed to consuming it. Here in this tool, really all you do in October is you pick that new month, you click a button, and it'll actually show you how you're doing actual to budget in the month of October. That's sort of the power of having that reporting piece along with Excel and automating a lot of your otherwise manual processes. So here it says, unfortunately, corporate U.S. sees weak decline in the month of October. And the P&L variance, if I'm looking at it, it now shows you October and gives you 10 months of actual data. Okay. So I know we have about 8 minutes left. So again, just to summarize, what we looked at today was really this component here. And we said, hey, great, you could deploy it on the web. It's called dashboard just because that's where you get the dashboards, the reports, and the ability to input info. Or you could deploy it in Excel. Regardless of the method of deployment, you still build it in Excel, leveraging all of the abilities. So that's really the presentation for today. Next, I want to open it up to some questions. And what I can do is actually read off the first question. And the first question is, can you load Salesforce data in or other data sources? And actually, yeah, so for Salesforce specifically, we have a connector. And if you have other data sources, really the point of this is that you can load in the sources, and then if you saw me do that payroll report, that took the employee level information, okay, from the payroll system, pushed it into the warehouse, and then took the data from Great Plains and also pushed it into the warehouse. So then you're seeing the detail information, but you're really also seeing how that affects the general ledger. Next question is, do I have to purchase the reporting component if I'm doing planning? Here's where, from a user standpoint, absolutely not. And you can add users that are going to consume reports later. From a module perspective, and because remember, what I'm referring to when I say modules is like reporting is a module, planning, dashboarding, and data warehousing. You automatically get the module because we said, hey, people want to do actual to budget reporting. So you automatically get the module, but you can add the users later. Let me try to read that question there. And Holly, do you have any questions that were addressed to you before I go in and kind of read the next one in the chat box here for me?
No, not at all, Alex. Just the ones that you received.
Okay. Yeah, the next one is, the workflow. Can that be done in the Excel base? The answer is yes. When I went into that assignment, you can actually set up start end dates so end users cannot input data. You can go in and say, hey, I want the security aspect of it, and I want to track who inputs data and who updates data. So then you can run a quick report saying, this person plugged in their budget numbers, but then they changed them 10 times. And then you can send them an email asking why. So all of that information is tracked because it's SQL stamped. Next question. This is actually a really good one. The data warehouse, is that a technical tool? And if so, what's the skill set required to learn it? And we really, to answer it, we pride ourselves on not being technical. I mean, our tools are really meant for finance and accounting folks. And what that entails is really that data warehouse. A non-technical finance and accounting folks with really a half day of training can learn how to import, export data using Excel. They can create hierarchy trees, and they can create elimination companies. If they just have disparate Excel spreadsheets, they'll figure out how to create a little data model inside of this data warehouse, and then use that for budgeting. And since I'm on this topic, this warehouse has actually 58 modules. So we're not queue-based, which is a huge advantage. We're a relational database, and we're on the SQL server with a very friendly user interface specifically for this data warehouse. And I think the last question here, which is great, I want to give you guys an extra 2 minutes off here of this webinar. The last question here, sorry about that. Let me read it. Is how easy is it to customize this, and what's the level of implementation effort? That's a really good question. The implementation does vary. We have a lot of different verticals, so look at them. If they are a good fit, perfect. You can use as a starting blocks. Delete a few columns, add a few columns, delete a few rows, but keep the underlying structure. That's going to be a much easier implementation. Then, say, the example I previously used, the Mega Yacht Company, theirs is really customized. And so we had to, and by we saying, the services team along with them, we had to build specific templates. The huge advantage with our tool, though, is the building of templates requires absolutely no technical skill set. As a consultant, I didn't know SQL, I didn't know any of that, and I was able to go to customers and build out their templates. And that's because really the customization is Excel, right? And then second to that is you're not going to come across technological barriers that Excel can't solve in that sense. Whereas a lot of other tools you have to learn technical, you have to learn MDX, you have to learn cubes. Here you don't, right? If you know basic Excel, you're trained on the software. You don't constantly have to rely on services to update any templates when you need changes. You should be able to do that yourself. So that is a good question. Any other questions? If you can address them to either Holly, Craig, or myself, we will address them immediately, and I'm happy to offer a personalized demonstration and answer any of your questions in more detail. I want to thank everyone for joining today. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully enjoy the presentation today. So thanks for having me.
Alex, thank you very much for the great overview. And everyone, yes, we'll also be sending out a recording, and both myself and Craig will follow up with you individually, but please feel free to send emails with questions as well. And again, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks, Alex.